All right, we're going to call our meeting to order. This is our regularly held Murfreesboro City Council meeting here in the Murfreesboro Municipal Airport. It is June the 9th, and it's a little after 11:30. If you will, bow with me. We'll do our prayer and our pledge. Father, thank you for this chance that we get to come together. I thank you for the people who are in this room, the men and women that we get to serve with. Lord, give us wisdom, give us guidance to be able to make decisions that will be for the betterment of our community. Lord, let us be able to put anything that hinders us from making those decisions aside, and let us make a decision that will be fitting to your honor. We love you and we praise you. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to have to jump around a little bit because we do have a few things that are listed on our workshop items, but we also are considering our budget changes. So item 3, we're going to have to move up as part of our fiscal year 22 budget changes and related ordinances. But first, we'll move to the purchase of liability, property, vehicle, cybercrime, and workers' comp insurance coverage for the city. Adam.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. I'd like to start out by introducing a couple of people who are here who the city's been working with to get the city's risk management and insurance program in place. From Public Entity Partners, we have Callie Westerfield over here, who is the Director of Member Services, and Anthony Roman, who's a Senior Underwriter with Public Entity Partners, and then Brandon Miller, who's an Executive Vice President with Arthur J. Gallagher Risk Management Services. And as you may recall, the city recently entered into a contract with Gallagher to be the city's broker for various insurance coverage lines. I've laid out the proposed coverages in council communication. I don't want to belabor, or regurgitate that in the interest of time. But for the most part, there are not any significant changes in terms of the coverage. We've seen a slight increase in the costs for liability insurance. That includes general liability, employers' emissions, employment practices, auto liability, and law enforcement. And I can get into the specifics of what was kind of driving that in addition to market trends. And the city manager and the mayor keep texting me. Sorry. Sorry, I was trying to explain why I was going off here.
That was me.
Sorry.
Yeah, Mayor.
I kept on getting distracted. And so we're proposing to purchase liability, auto property damage, and workers' compensation from Public Entity Partners, which we've done for the last 3 years, and Gallagher has brokered policies for property, fire and casualty with Travelers, and the city has had coverage through Travelers for about the last 5 years, I believe. We're also continuing coverage. We're proposing to continue coverage for crime and faithful performance of duty by city officials, and with Travelers as well. And then we're proposing to switch our coverage to a new carrier for cyber insurance, switching to Cowbell Insurance Agency, and that's where we're seeing the most significant increase in premiums on a percentage basis. It's an increase of $28,000 over $28,000, but it's a 130% increase in premiums. Most of that is driven by the market. However, there are some steps that the city can and will need to take within the next 6 months to make sure that we limit the increase of those increases in premiums going forward. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. It's my recommendation that you approve entering into these insurance contracts as laid out here, but I'm available to answer questions, as are Callie, Anthony, and Brandon.
Any questions? Do we have a motion?
Yep.
Second. Motion and second. I need to start working on saying, Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
You probably won't call me Mayor Bragg.
I think if anybody messes up, it'll be you.
I think you're right. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
We have the adoption of the fiscal, thank you for your help on insurance. We have the adoption of the fiscal year 22 budget changes and related ordinances, and we have under workshop items the fiscal year 22 budget hazard pay stipend. So you've got that first on your list if you want to sort of explain on where we are now with the recovery money.
Sure. So council approved stipends to be funded about 75% from American Recovery Plan Act funds. However, new guidance suggests that only 25% would likely be covered by the grant. So we wanted to bring that back to y'all to have council discuss whether these stipends should remain in the budget or if you want to pull those. If they remain in the budget, that would be covered by general fund balance. The majority would be covered by the general fund balance, most likely.
Yes, a little more background on that. When we had talked about it and come to council, they were still developing some of the rules on how this all would work. So they offered the money without any rules, and I'm talking about the federal government now. And so the rules have been developed, and as they've been developed, they somewhat narrowed, I guess is a good way to put it, narrowed what it could be used for. And so this has been a learning process. We didn't change this arbitrarily. It's been a moving ball, and frankly, it continues to move. And
That's right.
there are bills in Congress that would suggest, if they were to pass, that this money would go away or have to be paid back by entities that have already drawn it, which we haven't done. So, unfortunately, the timing just doesn't line up for when the money's coming in and how we can use it and everything else with our budget process. So, we've talked about some alternatives, and that's why we're...
And Craig, I think it's important, we don't have the money. We
don't.
We have to apply for the money first, so it's not that we have this money sitting in our account. And I think Aaron and Melissa, y'all have talked to other municipalities who are under that same assumption, who've already passed their budget.
Right, there are other communities who, spoke with the comptroller's office and with the GFOA, and they were all very much on board from how it sounded, the way before additional guidance was issued, that the stipends that they were planning would be eligible under the grant funds. However, Congress has released an interim final rule that suggests otherwise now, and additional guidance we're waiting on additional guidance to be released, and we're not sure when we'll get that guidance. And like Craig said, there is a bill out there for a clawback provision to take those funds back to fund the infrastructure package that President Biden has suggested. So at this point, we're not sure if we'll even get the money.
Can you give us a breakdown? I know there was, if I remember right, there were some of the stipends that were going to be able to be paid. We thought there were some that were going to be able to be paid from the CARES money, some that we were just going to be paying from general fund. Is that correct?
Right.
What was the breakdown of those costs?
It was about 1.8 million. Right around 1.8 million that we thought would be grant funded versus 600,000 from general fund. And at this point, we think it'd be closer to the 600,000 funded from the grant and the remaining funded out of general fund. Yeah, roughly.
So rough numbers, you think it would be $2 million hit to general fund if we kept those in?
No, it'd be closer to 2.4.
Okay.
I mean, unless we get the 600 back.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
If we went into it, I would suggest if y'all left the stipends in, just go in assuming that general fund will fund all of it, and then we will apply for any reimbursement from the grant that is eligible. But that way, we're budgeting on a worst-case scenario versus a best case.
What I've asked staff to do for the council is once we get guidance on that 24 million with the ARPAF, is to come back to us with a recommendation on how that money is to be spent, as opposed to us not necessarily knowing whether that's COVID relief, infrastructure projects that are allowed. Once it's finalized. And before us taking the money, we've got an idea of how we're going to allocate that before we take it.
Absolutely, we're happy to do that.
One of the things just while we're talking about it, we need to have a real clear understanding of any kind of handcuffs that come along with taking the money too. I mean, if you take this, then you are required to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G in the future. I mean, we just need to know that. We're in the middle of a couple of situations right now that are, because you took this money, you have to do this and this. And so we're kind of not able to maybe achieve some of the things we want to.
Right, and with the infrastructure, they've yet to release any guidance on that, on what's expected from that. So I wholeheartedly agree. Not to spend any till we know what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah.
I'll just make a couple comments too. And, when I saw this on the agenda, the first thing that crossed my mind was, how did we get ourselves in this situation? And then when you say interim final guidance, I can remember dealing with that at the bank on the PPP loans that we dealt with. And, you think you know where the target is and the target moves, and then you think you know where the target is and the target moves again. With that being said, just my opinion, we probably got out a little early with making the commitment to do that. And in the grand scheme of things, the basis for why we made the commitment to do it, I'm not sure has changed, just from my perspective. And so I would advocate that we do that, because we've already said we were going to do it, and it's hard to back up on those things. The rest of the council may not agree with that. I understand there's a consequence and there's uncertainty to it. But I wouldn't feel great about going back on that, just me personally.
Yeah, I'm sort of where you are. I don't think, this is just my opinion, I don't think we got out too early. I think Melissa, Aaron, Jennifer all met. Franklin had already passed a stipend based on that guidance. So I think much like the PPP loans, the government's changing those.
I get it.
Yeah, so I agree. I don't think it changes our goal of what we wanted to do for the employee, but I don't want y'all to think that
It's certainly a lesson learned on our side, and I agree on that. Like I said, the GFOA, that's the Government Finance Officers Association, and they work and talk a lot with DC officials as these bills come out. So there was some sort of comfort level that they seemed to agree with it as well at first, and then they backed up shortly after council met. So I'm not making any excuses, and like I said, definitely a lesson learned. Any new grants that come out, we would certainly wait until all final rules are out and we know every nook and cranny of the details before we presented it.
Yeah.
This is one of those deals, though. This is hopefully a one-off deal in our country, as far as the PPP, they're running full bore trying to get it done and not knowing what the rules are either, and kind of same thing with this. So I'm with it as far as the, I think we're pretty lucky to be in a situation where we added to fund balance
Right.
last year, kind of unexpectedly, I guess, so to speak, and probably there's a good justification for saying part of that was on the backs of our employees and can certainly justify taking some of that fund balance, and especially given the amount of our fund balance relative to our budget, that we could honor that number that we came up with. And it does look to be about a $1.8 million difference. And that's one time that kind of tides us over to when we do our next pay study, our salary study, and can then go more focused on where we really need help for retention and recruiting.
I think that is important that we make sure that, even though that $2 million is a big number, the $5 million conservatively that we are adding to fund balance, we didn't give raises in our last budget until 6 months in. So the money that we saved in the fund balance was because we didn't give raises. So, I think what we're doing with that stipend is really coming back and saying, we're giving that money back that we didn't budget for. But the important part too is, I think probably the people who were affected just probably the most would be on that starting pay range that we have, and that $1,500 to $2,500 stipend in some cases is a significant 5% and 6% increase as opposed to the other side. So I'm fine, like Rick and Ronnie have said, just keeping that in the budget.
So Mayor, so I'll understand, make sure I'm clear. So what are we saying we're going to do for the employees?
We would do I think what we agreed on was a 6% for public safety increase, a 5% for non-public
Everyone else.
safety. That would be broken down sorry, go ahead.
What is a dollar figure?
Well,
You're talking about the raises.
I'm talking,
about the stipend.
our overall compensation for fiscal year 21-22 would be 6%, 5%. That would be broken down into 2.5% cost of living increase, 3.5% salary increase, range or step increase, and then $2,500 for those that we deemed that were essential during, everybody was essential, but those that worked the front line, solid waste, public safety for COVID, $2,500 and $1,500 for those that were not directly in line for COVID.
I have a concern that, and thank you, Aaron, for helping me with these figures. I have a concern that we have 18 employees that have topped out, and of those 18, 15 of these employees are police officers, and they are not getting the raise. So based on their job, putting on their uniforms every day, and I know this can happen to any of us, but they are more in line for this to happen, saying goodbye to their families and don't know if they're coming home because of just the nature of everything, of safety. So I would like to see us, these topped-out police officers, be in this pay increase. Give them some percentage, because right now, based on what we're doing, they're not getting a penny, not one penny. And
So-
that's not
So they're
fair.
not only topped out, but they're outside of their range.
But I'm saying with the pandemic that we are still going through, and they were out there, that's why we giving that extra money. I think if nothing else, but for this year, those 18 employees, and I don't know what department those other 3 are in, but I know 15 of them are police officers and that protect us every day. I would like to see us give them a percentage raise also.
Are you talking about the stipend plus, so everybody gets the stipend?
Get the stipend, yes.
That doesn't matter
Yes.
if you're topped out, right?
Okay.
No.
The topped out people have not gotten the topped out people have not gotten a raise. And I'm talking about 15 police officers, and I don't know here again what department the other 3 are in, haven't gotten a raise in 2 or 3 years. And their bills are like our bills, and the grocery prices are like our grocery prices. I would like to see us, if nothing else for this year, include them, because everybody's had such a hard time.
I mean, I'm a fan, and to a certain extent, I do want to make sure we're clear on something. I think I had a conversation with a police officer about this a week or 2 ago, and that particular person's situation was created by the fact that they got hired on June 28th instead of July 2nd, back when we had the old issue in play of, well, you got your next raise if you got hired before this date versus if you got after, then you ended up with 2 years without a raise kind of a deal. And so couple things I do want to be careful with. I think that when we did the reclass, the class and comp, and then moved to the step system, I think that we knew this was going to happen. From a standpoint of, we knew there were, to get parity and equality
Right.
amongst the people who had been there, the amount of time that they've been there and all that there were some people who had been there less time, but yet were getting paid more because of that June 28th or July 2nd kind of a deal of when we got our raises 15 years ago, whenever that was, okay? Well, so what we did was try to deal with that, and the way that what happens is now these other people who have been there longer are catching up by them getting a raise and them not getting, the higher ones, the ones that are topped out, not getting a raise because they're topped out, because they got there quicker. So those people that are topped out now, I want to make sure, do I understand this correctly? If it's true for all of them, some of them, none of them, those people have had a benefit for the last 15 years, whenever that stuff was happening with the June 30th, and they've been getting paid more than what their peers have been this whole time. Just maybe even in some cases because they got hired a number of days different than somebody. And so I think we need to be very careful if we try to do something to just address those 15 employees or those 18 employees, that we're going to be backing off of what we were trying to fix back when we did the pay study, which was to get in these ranges. Because if we do that, we're going to keep ourselves in a position of, I've been here longer than that person and got the raise longer. Remember those things we dealt with? It was like, I've been here longer, I got the raise early, or I got the promotion earlier, but yet I'm getting paid less than this other person who's been here less time and got the promotion after I did. And so if those are, I think, the people that are probably the people that are topped out, but I don't know that for sure. And that may be something we want to look at before we make a decision to.
Well,
there are different circumstances.
I suspect. I just don't know
That
how
created
many.
the situation. And so, look, there's no perfect pay plan. You create any process, there's going to be outliers that you have to address at some point in time. What we decided to do with several of these people is to not take, because the alternative when you create a pay plan is to put everybody in the range, which would be to take money away from people. We decided not to do that. That left them not topped out, but above range. Well, there's two different things. We shouldn't confuse those two. So the people that are above range have different circumstances and why they're above range. Some of what Rick described, but some people who were just adjusted in their positions and their salaries were left, even though they could have been dropped down, they weren't. So they're above range. They will catch up at some point in time, depending on how long they're with the city, but as the range moves with cost of living increases, they will be within range, and then they'll start to get their increases. So in all these cases, the decision was made not to take money away from them, so they were getting more money than they would have for everybody else doing the exact same job for a period of time, and until they get caught up and back into the range. So that's the most common circumstances. Everybody's individual, everybody has individual circumstances. So, as we do this, they are getting the stipend this year, which is accommodate the COVID type of situation. But being above range means you're above range, and you should stay above where you're at, or be adjusted into the range, or wait until your range catch up with you. Those are really the alternatives that work under a pay plan, unless we start creating all these exceptions, which is always has a consequence. It will always have a consequence in the future if we keep creating exceptions to the exceptions that we're trying to catch up to.
I agree with that, but I preference my statement by saying we just went through a terrible pandemic. And some people, spouses even lost their jobs because of this terrible thing. And I'm just saying, I would like to see us for 1 year do this. And when we're talking about fairness, I mean, there are people sitting next to people who've been there longer. been here longer than Ron, and Ron is making more money than me. I mean, that's a fact, okay? So I'm just saying and asking the council if, for an exception, if we can give these employees who protect us day and night, and I think that's very important, and they are under a very, very stressful job, if we can make an exception and put them in the increase this year. That's all I'm asking. And if you all don't feel that way, that's fine, but I feel that way.
Yeah, all I'm worried about is who are we talking about being fair to? And if it's, are we talking about being fair to the 18 people, or are we talking about being fair to the other 250 people who've been getting paid less, who are within the range of their jobs? I mean, you know, is it fair to the other 250 people to change just for 15 when they're only getting the standard, they're within the range, they've just been getting the standard raises all along? That's the only place where I'm kind of worried about this. I mean, I guess what I'm not just saying I completely poo-poo it, because the heart behind it, I'm completely with it. You know, I mean, I don't want anybody not to get a raise, you know, particularly this year, that kind of a deal. I'm with you on that piece of this. But we did adopt a pay plan that addressed the issues that were the big picture issues that got away from equality in the pay ranges and all that kind of stuff. And this is the consequence of that. Whether there's COVID or not, that was going to happen. And so personally, for me to be able to consider it further, I mean, I don't think I'd vote on it for what I know right this second. But I mean, if we want to get in the middle of 18 people and why specifically each of those exist, why those topped out and outside of range situations exist, I mean, I would need to know what are the ramifications if we do it, you know, if we do make some sort of a change, because it's not really that easy, I don't think, to just say, well, we're just going to give them a raise, because now you've completely blown up the pay range. Our entire pay plan is completely blown up if we say it's okay to go outside of pay range.
With a pay plan, in my opinion, well, I'm not going to get into that. Look,
We're about to do new
guys,
pay ranges.
whatever you all want to do, this is my opinion, and I'm just throwing it out to you. I feel strongly about it. But hey, we a group, we vote. After we take the vote, we move on.
I certainly don't want to be the one carrying the torch for not giving pay raises. I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to make sure we think about, I remember why we did it, and I'm just making sure we're just thinking about that when we make a decision. I would be open to doing it, but I would probably want more information before I did it.
I think maybe a fair compromise for those 18 employees. I do think there's a reason why they're out of range, and if we start going and adjusting and giving people more when they're out of range, I mean, at some point you get to, this is what the job pays, and you can be here for 30 years. I know an example we've used before, a teller at the bank. I mean, those positions pay to an X number, and the more that you keep getting those out, then it affects everyone. So I would be more up to find out what the number is if we gave we're giving a stipend, but maybe a fair way to look at those positions one time is to do a cost of living adjustment one time for this year, to say we understand the circumstances that everybody's gone through this year. So those 18 employees, we're going to look at the circumstances first. I mean, if somebody is way out of range because they got a benefit 10 years ago that because of a pay plan they shouldn't have got, then that's a different situation, because they've gotten 10 years of being paid more than what they should have been paid. But if we look at it and say, look, we want to do 2.5% cost of living increase for this year, that's it, not moving forward for just this year, then that's something I think we could say is not a huge number. But if we give an overall increase to some people who are out of range, then they're just going to continually get out of range, and we're going to have this conversation every single year because the range is not going to catch up.
So Jennifer just ran that number, and it'd be about 32,000.
I mean,
What did you say, Aaron? Sorry.
About 32,000.
$32,000.
To do what?
To do a
To do-
2.5% one-time COLA.
But you would want to do that as a one-time payment.
It'd
You would not
basically
want
be
to
an
add that
additional
to the
stipend,
pay.
right? It would be an additional stipend, not an additional COLA. Not a
We used to do that long before the last two pay plans, when we had only like 3 steps. We didn't have the 7, 8 steps we have now, and a range at the end. We determined what date it would be paid. It was paid in one check. It was a flat, it used to be a flat dollar amount, not a percent. And they would get it on that date determined by council and payroll. They'd come up with a date. And then it did not count towards retirement. It didn't count towards any matching. It was just an extra payment.
It's basically a bonus that you're given for the call.
It would be important in this conversation is to probably know how far outside the range. So when we do our 3.5% COLA, our actual COLA this year that we're doing, the range adjustment, how close does that get?
They're butting right up
15
against
of
it
those,
now,
or
aren't they?
18 of those
We're all
people
within
is,
like 100.
I think they're
almost.
all, the police officers at least are all right there now at the they're butting right
Close.
up at it. So if there was a cost of living next year, I would think they would get an
that's
increase
another,
next year.
the reason I was asking is that was his case that I talked to was, this 3.5 that we're already talking about giving for the cost of living, this budget, this upcoming budget, was going to get him basically right on top of his numbers. So now he just caught up. He's getting ready to catch up. And then anything we do in the future, he'll be able to participate in cost of living range increases.
Assuming the pay range increase next year, yes.
So it's been a case of a couple of years or 2 or 3 or 4 years of catch up for some people, depending on how they got out there. But
Instead of doing this all on the fly, which we have history, we don't make good decisions when we try to do. Can y'all come back with this information to us, and then if we need to do a budget amendment, we can do a budget amendment as opposed to if everybody's okay with this? Because I mean, if we start if somebody's close in that situation, then when we do our pay plan or our study, then that may take care of all of it. And then we can look back and adjust. But if we increase someone now, then we could be doing them damage for next year when the pay plan. We could put them further out of range where the plan doesn't catch up with them. So if that's okay, if we could get the information to make an informed decision, that would be good. There are two other things
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
The pay numbers, did we talk about getting that done by the end of this calendar year?
December. By December.
Yeah, sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead, Chuck, sorry.
Before we start getting into any other changes, there were two things that I wanted to make sure the council would be okay. After talking specifically with police, I think we've got 39 positions that are not filled right now. And one of the things, after studying and getting into this, and I think this is just overall as a city, Pam have talked to her and talked to Craig, Aaron, we don't give what I would call experience modifications based on someone who's applying from an outside agency. So if someone moves in from, hypothetically, somebody moves from California or the East Coast, and they all are coming to Middle Tennessee, if they were a good police officer in California, we don't technically have a mechanism in place if someone comes with 10 years' experience that we say, we want you to come in, you're a good employee, we want to give you credit for some of your experience coming into the city. We just say, look, here's the range you're in. And so I want to devise some kind of plan where if someone's coming in, that they're a good employee, whether it's engineering, whatever job, that we give some kind of ability to give, hey, we want to start you at mid-range because you've got X number of years of service, as opposed to saying, you've built up 10 years of service in California, but you're starting in Tennessee and you're going to start as on the bottom end of the range. We're never going to be able to recruit good people if we don't give some kind of experience modification as they apply with the city. You would just be starting over every time you apply with a different organization, and that's not going to happen. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, specifically towards police, we've talked about this for the last many, many years. I want us to try to come up, and I want the council to see if you're on board with these two things, somehow getting the police to four 10-hour shifts. And with that means we've got to have more people. But if we can get to 4 10s, that may give us the ability that it's not necessarily money, it's that you give somebody where they can work 4 10-hour shifts, and I would argue they're already working 10-hour shifts by the time that they they start their day and end their day, especially if you're on the midnight shift, because you're losing a day and or a half a day on your time off because you're trying to get reacclimated to not sleeping, during the day. So if we can come up with some kind of study to say, here's what we need to do to get 410s, and that will help us with our retention. So those are the two things that, after looking at this since our last meeting, that wanted to somehow figure out.
Yeah, since from our last meeting, I will say I poked around a little bit and to some other, actually, fire departments just happened to be what I was looking at. And I think, I found 2 different fire departments in our area that have, there were different names for it. There was firefighter 1 and then there was firefighter 1 with experience, so there was a different pay range for those beginning, they just starting there. But, if our neighbors are giving credit for that and we're all worried about fattening frogs, which I think we all should be worried about, we got to be able to do it. So, because all we're doing is doing the fattening rather than being able to take some. So I'm with that for sure, and I'm totally open to looking at what it would take to do 410s.
Chief is here, and I think we're just going to have to come up with creative ways to give benefit that may not necessarily be within our pay structure. It's got to be more of, this is a benefit that you have to take into account. So.
Part of the reason I asked in relative to the conversation we just had about the topped out stuff is make sure we're going to have, be looking at pay comparisons by December, is because we do need to address this stuff. I agree, we need to address it and need to address it really fast. And 30-something officers is just no way that can be okay. And that we got to get on top of that in a big old hurry. So, look, I've had something on my mind. I'll tell you this. Another thing about the 410s, and it just kind of hit me. But the last time we were talking, and in council chambers about what these folks get paid, talking about people having to have second jobs and all that kind of stuff. Most of that was kind of directed in the firefighter sense as we were talking about it. Well, they just happen to be able to do that because of their schedule. We got a whole lot of people who make the same thing that they make, and we could just look right over at the police officers and do the comparison of where you fall in from experience. Well, they're working 5-6 days a week. They make the exact same as the firefighter, basically. They don't have the luxury of going out and taking a second job on their 2 days off, going mowing yards or putting in roofs or, whatever it may be. They don't have that luxury because they're working every day. But they're making that same amount, and so they don't have the luxury of being able to go take a second job. Now, I think we got, maybe if we get 410s, that at least opens up if they want to, or think, I hope they're resting. And I hope we can pay them enough to be able to rest. But
So is everyone okay with us, with staff coming back at least for recommendations with those, a service modification if we work through? And my idea was just as quickly as like, hey, if you come in, you get 50%. Wherever you've worked before, you can come in with 50% of service to the city of Murfreesboro. So, and then also coming up with the chief, it'd be through Craig to the chief, coming up with a plan on what it would look like and what we'd need to do to go to 410s with our police officers.
for sure.
All right, is everyone on hazard pay stipends? We're going to need a motion either to keep those in or take those out.
I don't think you do. We can just do that as part of the other changes that I'm going to present.
Okay.
First, I think based on the increased sales tax revenues over our projections, we can raise next year's budget by $1.3 million for local sales tax and about $300,000 for the state sales tax. So increasing revenues by $1.6 million. We'll now take out the $1.8 million in grant revenues from the ARPA grant for now until we get more information. And in addition, there are a couple of personnel adjustments requested for HR totaling $37.5. And this includes position changes and moving a part-time position to full-time. So that will result in a use of unassigned fund balance of $2,067,000 roughly.
How much are we estimating that conservatively you think will put into fund balance from this past year?
for FY '21.
I'm going to hold you to the number, but.
Yeah, it will, but I'm thinking probably, around 5 million, is hopefully a good estimate there. That may be low, may be high. Did I hedge good enough there?
You did.
It may be low, it may be high, pretty much covers it all.
Nails it down.
Pretty much is the best hedge you
Right,
can get.
thanks, thank you.
Are there any other changes?
Those are all the changes.
Council members, do y'all have anything that y'all want to add or take out of the budget? All right, seeing none, we'll need, I think we've got 3 things that we've talked about that you're going to come back with information regarding the 18 employees to give us more information on that. And then the 2 things that we just talked about. Ordinance 21013 is our fiscal year 22 appropriations, and this is second and final reading.
We need a,
You'll need a motion on the
We need you to
changes.
amend the motion with these changes before you vote on it for second reading.
so moved.
Thank you.
Motion is second. Second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Martin. Mr. Shacklet. Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We now have ordinance 21014. This is the fiscal year 22.
We're doing C. Now we're doing the ordinance.
I'm sorry.
21013
I'm sorry.
as amended.
Yeah. Ordinance 21013, fiscal year 22 appropriations as amended.
I'll move for approval as amended.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Ordinance 21014, fiscal year 22, the tax rate.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now move into, we've already talked about fiscal year 22 hazard pay stipends, so we can remove that. We've got the Comcast cable TV franchise agreement.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. First, I'd like to recognize Kelly Baker and also Kim Sasser-Hayden, who worked on with Comcast, who worked on this agreement that we have before you to kind of do a quick review on. The last franchise was a 15-year franchise and expired in 2018, so we spent the past couple of years kind of renegotiating this new one. Couple of things. This franchise allows Comcast to continue to use the rights of way to deliver cable TV service to our citizens. It's a non-exclusive franchise, meaning anyone else that wanted to come in and provide the same.
You probably want to pull that microphone a little closer.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thanks. It's a non-exclusive franchise, so any other competitor that wants to come into the market to provide service has the ability to do so. And it's a 10-year agreement. Comcast will continue to operate and maintain a cable system capable of providing over 200 channels of video programming. And the compensation is similar to what the existing franchise is. It's 5% franchise fees of the cable TV services of the gross revenue, and it's due quarterly to the city. And the city can also conduct audits whenever it would like to make sure that we're receiving the right amount. Comcast will continue to provide the 3 local access channels for non-commercial purposes on their cable system, 1 for the government channel and 2 educational channels for MTSU. And the city has the right to rename, reprogram, and otherwise change the programming of any of those access channels. The city will receive a $100,000 government access grant for equipment 30 days after the execution of the franchise. Comcast will adhere to the FCC customer service standards. There's liability insurance coverage, and there's also a level playing field where if another competitor comes in and wants to compete and obtain a franchise, it would have to be a similar type of franchise that we've given Comcast. some things that are no longer in this franchise, and it's based on an FCC order in 2019. It's Order 621, which essentially means any kind of in-kind contributions that are above and beyond the 5% can be deducted from franchise fees that we receive based on what the company thinks the market value is. So we felt it was better to have these two items taken out of the franchise. That's complementary cable TV service. It's now in everybody's budget that wanted to keep that service for their buildings and in the departments. And also the iNet and dark fiber that was provided in the previous franchise at no cost for city communications. You'll recall last week during your council meeting, you approved a request from the IT staff to release a competitive sealed proposal for a managed service system that we would move off the dark fiber onto this new system. And I believe that has actually gone out for bid today as well. Just one other thing, there's a public hearings set for the Cable TV Commission meeting on the agreement coming up Monday, and they also reviewed it at their last meeting as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on this agreement.
Any questions for Mr. Bozeman?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to congratulate your department. You all do a fantastic job.
Thank you.
On all of, everything I've watched has been A+.
With that, I'll make a motion we approve it.
Second.
It was actually not, it'll come back to the council for approval. This is just kind of a review.
Hearing.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
You get upset, you can't vote.
Need to vote on anything, correct, Melissa?
Just information.
another motion.
We now move into, I'm sorry, informational side. This is for the VA golf course update. Angela? There we go.
Good afternoon. I, as requested, am going to present some information for you, just an overview of VA Golf. Trey Adams, our Director of Golf, and Marty Mayer, the Superintendent over the maintenance and upkeep of the course, are here as well. So the VA Golf Course, which is located on the north side of town, the City of Murfreesboro has leased 88 acres from the Department of Veterans Affairs since 1987. Just a quick look, you can see the golf course here, the VA campus, Richard Siegel Park, and the landfill just to the north. This is a close-up of the main area. There is a trailer serving as the pro shop here with a gravel parking lot and a Quonset hut that serves as the maintenance shed. Brought a few pictures for you. This is a pro shop. This is a trailer that was placed by the city in 2003, serving in this role. A shot of the inside of that facility. The maintenance shop is a Quonset hut from the 1940s. It is Quonset hut. The course itself has just targeted irrigation, basically just spigots like you would do on your yard. The course itself does not have a in-ground irrigation system. But they do target specific areas. This is a view from the north side of the course looking south, and from the south side looking north. You can see there the beautiful rolling hills of Murfreesboro in the far distance.
Beautiful rolling hill.
Rolling hill in the background. Taking a look, I think there's three key considerations to really look at the financial aspects of the VA golf course. One is operating. I want to show you a focus on that. Two is the capital cost, which are very unique to this course. And then three is the lease itself. So taking a look just at the operating costs for a moment of the history, one key thing to point out in this is the personnel expenses. What we have done in terms of bookkeeping since the city first made the lease arrangement with the VA for those personnel costs is an allotment. It averages about $85,000 now. It includes 25% of of 4 salaries: the director of golf, the superintendent of golf, the administrative assistant, and the mechanic at Old Fort Park, at Old Fort Golf. It is included in that personnel cost. You can look at where we've functioned from a net loss over the years. This year, with the decrease in expenses, we cut a position there. There are at golf, there are 4 part-time facility attendants, 1 full-time lead greenskeeper, and 2 part-time laborers that work exclusively at Old Fort, at the VA. When you look at that net loss, if you subtracted the allotment piece that was considered in that personnel with the decrease in expenses and the sharp increase in golf, not just at the VA, but across the nation, you will see this year we are projected, without that allotment, to actually clear about $4,000 by the end of the month. When you look at a fee comparison of other courses in the area, it's important to look at 9-hole walking rather than 18 holes with a cart, so that you're doing that across the board. You can see the fees of $8 at VA, $7 for juniors and seniors, comparable to Old Fort. For a senior playing during the week, a $2 difference. It's $1 more expensive at Smyrna. You can kind of look and compare across the way. VA Golf is certainly the most affordable in the area.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Go, if you don't mind, 2 slides back,
2 slides?
right here. Okay, monthly, do we collect something from the VA golf course?
Monthly, do we collect? I'm sorry, I don't
Do we
understand.
take any money out of what they make and put it somewhere else?
That is the allotment and the personnel costs that I think you're referring to.
Okay.
So we don't take anything away. In the bookkeeping, when you count from a personnel cost, we have staff that are on site there at the VA. Their salaries are directly, looking at this, it's not really a separate budget, just a separate cost center. When you look at the staff that work directly at the VA in that piece, and then you look at the additional work that goes into it by other golf staff. For example, at the point of sale at VA, they use a old school cash register. Wendy, who is our administrative aide at Old Fort, takes that tape, turns it into a report that is sent to City Hall. So some of the work that goes into it, the supervision that Trey and Marty do, in addition to those 4 staff, some other work that goes into the operations of the VA by other golf staff is accounted for in that way. It's not a direct cost as far as keeping a timesheet and saying, I'm spending exactly 25% of my time. It's just meant as a bookkeeping measure to acknowledge the fact that it's not a standalone facility.
Thank you.
You bet. So here's our fee comparison. When you look at the task of developing a sustaining model, this is addressing only the operating cost. When you look at the conversation regarding an increase of greens fees, and the chart will show you, hey, if we raise the price at the VA by $1, assuming we play 20,000 rounds, then we're going to make $20,000 next year, adding that to the additional revenues to try to offset the operating loss. This is not an ask for a capital spend. This is a, for the record, this is a preliminary opinion of acknowledging the capital needs at that site. Because we lease the property, it is unique to any other facility that we have. It's like if you were renting a home and installing an in-ground pool in the house that you rent. So when you look at, are we asking to install a $500,000 irrigation system? We are not. If we were, this is a look at what it would cost and an acknowledgement acknowledgement of the fact that the existing facilities will not last forever. So the idea of operating cost aside, you have to look at an investment into the facility itself in order to be sustainable. The parking lot, $120,000 there to consider paving that lot, to me would be a priority spend. The gravel lot that's there is less accessible and does not meet the standards that we expect of others.
I guess that is the question. Do we, I already know the answer to this, but I'm asking you, do we allow gravel parking lots in the city?
We do not. So looking at the lease itself, we have a lease now that is current through the end of June of 2022. The lease includes a termination clause where either party can revoke for any reason within 30 days. So you could look at it as a 30-day lease rather than a 3-year lease in that piece. We are scheduled to begin discussions regarding renewing that lease this October with the VA. I know the city has a long history of discussions with that lease. Could we do something longer? Could we purchase the property? Could we do all of those things? When you look at what the VA's needs and obligations are for their own mission in serving the inpatients and their facility of what they would use that space for, that is a consideration that we have to keep in mind. They are willing, or have been in the past, willing to allow us to use this space for golf with the understanding of it's their property, and when they are ready to do something different, they certainly can. Yes?
Last question. So the 30-day termination, are there a bunch of parameters around that, or it's just for no reason whatsoever they can terminate or we can terminate in 30 days?
Yes, there is a copy of the lease in your agenda packet. I'll look to Adam for, to kind of expand on that, but it says specifically may be terminated by either party with a 30-day notice.
So we're not talking
No reason.
about like for breach of contract kind of deal, you can get out in 30 days. We're just talking about.
I've changed my mind. Yes, sir.
Yep, termination for convenience.
That's why Angela said really it's a 30-day lease.
Yeah.
And from the VA's perspective, if they suddenly find a use for the property, they want to be able to act on it. So that's, I'm pretty sure the city didn't demand that provision.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
What we're saying, so far your presentation, based on the slides you put up, the VA is costing us, we're running into the hole with them.
We have historically subsidized the operations at VA Golf. This year, for the first year ever, you can say that we are very close to breaking even with operating cost. It does not address the capital needs. The capital needs are very different. In any of our other parks or city facilities, we own the property, so when we make an investment in the upkeep of that property, then we have an asset. In this case, when we make an investment, we have 30-day use of the investment we made. And it could potentially roll for 30 days as it has for years.
So, push a rumor here that I'm spreading that we're going to close the VA, but that's okay. I'm good with that. I have been asked by several people, and I said, based on the information we have, the council is looking at closing the VA. And that's exactly what we're looking at, closing the VA. Now, my perspective on that is this. We have a large, and I know, that's why I asked you about, I know either losing or breaking even, I know that. But okay, I'm looking at people, I'm looking at lives of people. We have so many people that golf at the VA. My son learned to play golf at the VA, that are on fixed income, and they cannot afford to go to these other places. Now, I went out to Old Fort, and based on the day I went out there, they cannot even take more golfers on the weekend because they already booked up. I mean, so many people go out there. What I'm trying to say is, I would hate to see us close a facility that is going to change the lives of so many people in our community, you know. It's going to really change the lives of, they cannot afford to go to these other golf places.
I appreciate that, I really do. I think golf is a proven benefit from a wellness standpoint. It is a lifelong sport. There are a lot of folks that truly love to play golf. When we look at the investments that we're making in our city-owned courses, I just want to take a moment to brag on Bloomfield Links. Just rolled out the Kids Play Free program there, which is a grant-supported program, and have 188 children that just signed up to play free there at Bloomfield. So just a little sidebar to brag there on that program. But I agree with you. There are people that are very passionate about the sport and about that location. Yes, ma'am.
Can you pull up the cost of the different facilities for a second? Just make sure we got, yeah.
Yes, so when you look, and most courses, at Old Fort being one, it is more expensive on the weekends. It is, in comparison, again, focusing on that 9-hole walking piece. Mr. Adams put together this comparison and might be able to provide some more specifics to the individual pieces. I also wanted to point out the date established. We have been doing the VA. The city has been running operations there since 1987. So we put the date established just to kind of see how golf in the area has changed, what else is accessible for some of the newer courses, you know, where you can play at state parks, at private courses, and other nearby municipal courses.
Angela, you said 87. Is that what you meant for the VA?
1987, since the city has been doing it. I believe before that it was being operated by the VA since the beginning of time, as I'm told.
You talk about starting discussions in October.
Yes.
Is that a discussion, or is it basically we're going to do the same thing? Or what kind of negotiations are we talking about? Or is it basically just saying we're going to continue it for another, is it a 3-year term on the lease? Is that what?
It has in the past been between 1 and 3 years. There have been different leases over the years. Our current one says 1, but it's dated for 3. I think that my experience is that there are many layers to the decision-making authority at the VA, at what this piece, is that fair? What this will look like as far as the negotiation standpoint, I can't predict. I can tell you some of the research that we've done. I can tell you about some of the conversations I've had with VA representatives. I have yet to speak to a final decision maker or one that will own that title in that piece, because there are so many layers to that as it goes into. One of the local contacts that Trey and I went over and met in 2019 with the goal about talking about accessible golf being more available to the inpatients. It is free for now as a part of our contract, and of course our practice is for the inpatients to play for free. Trying to encourage using that more, trying to focus on adaptive golf and how we can work together with their recreational therapist. We had some of those conversations. In looking at the course itself, Old Fort Park and Bloomfield are actually more accessible from a mobility standpoint because of the cart paths, because of the layout, because of the parking lot itself. So putting a focus on how to make golf more accessible to everyone is still an important conversation. But we met and discussed the longevity of that space for golf and of that space and how it meets the mission of the VA itself. And I can't predict what they're going to say. We did have a representative from Congressman DeJarlais' office that reached out relatively recent to engage in that discussion of a longer term lease, and do not expect for that to be an option. Of course, we can ask again.
Angela, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Are you recommending the VA be closed to us?
Right now, I'm doing as asked by providing information to you.
So Craig, at our council retreat, a council member, I think Mr. Wade, had asked for this to be on our agenda. At the council retreat, did we vote on closing the VA?
We didn't vote on anything at the
Was there a
retreat.
recommendation that the VA be closed at that retreat?
from, the city provided information, whether it, and the staff did, whether it
So the
boils
reason I
down
say
to a
that,
recommendation.
Madeline, all due respect, somebody started a rumor that we were closing the VA when
Right.
no one at that council retreat said that we were closing it. You're not recommending that it's been closed to it. What was brought to us was that we're going to have to make a determination on capital expenditures at the VA. I mean, several of us went through this back 10 years ago when they wanted to close the VA, and we all made the decision that we wanted to keep it open. So I just want to publicly say, I'm not, nor have said that we should close the VA. We've gotten all these emails. I even think the employees were told that they were losing their jobs. I think you interviewed the employees. We didn't say that. So what we're going to have as a council make a decision, and I equated it to somebody who called me about it the other day. We're in a rental house that we don't own. We have a landlord, and we're going to have to make the decision if we're going to spend $120,000 on the parking lot. We're going to have to make a decision if we want an $85,000 bathroom. So in other words, we're going to have to make a decision in our rental house if we're going to pave the driveway, if we're going to put new carpet in there, and if we're going to remodel the bathrooms, knowing that we don't own that property. So that's what I'm saying, Madam. I think that's the decision the council is going to have to make if we want to spend money on a 30-day lease. Now, I'm not advocating we do that or don't, but the emails that we've been getting, unless I'm missing something, council, y'all can weigh in. I don't think we talked about closing the VA
In all
golf
due
course.
respect to you, Mayor, in all due respect to you, number one, you all gonna get off of me, okay? You're gonna get off my back. And I'm telling people to listen to the tape of that meeting when Mr. Wade and I had a scream match, and you all were saying, well, I said, well, where are these people going to go? Where are these people going to go who can't afford? And you all are hollering back, let them go here, let them go here. And I said, hey, they can't afford to go there. Now, I was asked, let's put this on the record. I was asked, are we going to close the VA? And I said, based on the information that was given at the retreat, I think so. Because all of you all were hollering back at me, well, let them go somewhere else, let them go somewhere else. When we always look at a dollar amount and we leave the feelings of people out. And that's what I said. And I'm going to stick to that. And another thing was said at the retreat while we talking, let's talk about it. We were told that that shed was about to fall in, that shed. It's not. It's not, because I went out there and I inspected it. It's solid as some of the houses you all live in. That shed is solid. Number two, we were told that it leaks in there. Is that not right?
It has had leaks.
It has leaks, right?
It has had leaks.
Okay, that place hasn't leaked in 5 years. Okay, we can go back. I'm sure it's had, but it hasn't in 5 years. So let's just put the record straight. That's all, you know.
If we're talking about $2, I mean, because while we're at it, we're talking about $1 less than Smyrna and $2 less than going to Old Fort.
Right.
So somebody on a fixed budget
Yes.
who's playing 20 rounds of golf per year.
Okay.
So their budget isn't that fixed. That's $40 extra per year to play the Old Fort rather than play the VA.
Right.
All I'm kind of thinking about, I think the only comment I made was about the price of what was going on. I don't think I yelled at anybody about closing this.
So what are you saying
They're going to play
about the
somewhere
price?
else, or they're going to play somewhere else, or any of that. I didn't scream any of that, for the record. And we can all listen to the tape.
Right.
But for $40 a year, I'm not so sure this is like doing something for people who are on a fixed budget and can't afford to do something. If you're playing 20 rounds of golf per year, I mean, I don't know how you argue this is doing something for the people, and because we love somebody or don't love somebody that we're talking about $40 a year. I am saying that I'm probably not willing to put anywhere between $120 and $1 million into a facility that they can bail on us in 30 days.
Well,
I'll tell you, that's the discussion about the clubhouse. I think I remember it being said that there have been a lot of issues with it. It's 15 years. It was meant to only be there for 5 or some number of years. We had design built up to build a real clubhouse, and of course probably the same discussion that happened back then, that people didn't want to spend that money on a place that had a 30-day lease on it, I suspect was probably the reason. So it is, we can kick this thing down the road, whether it's leaking now or did leak 5 years ago or is going to leak 5 years from now. Somebody's going to have to deal with it and make a decision on making some big improvements and making it more accessible for ADA reasons and that sort of thing. I don't think I'm game for going into the capital piece of this. I mean, people will have different opinions on this part, but in my mind, Old Fort's too cheap when I look at that. In my mind, VA needs to go up $1 or $2 to try to offset some of the expense on an operating standpoint, and we move on. I can look at that right there and tell you Old Fort is definitely $1 around better than every course up there.
They can't get in the Old Fort like they can in the VA. And another thing,
Another reason
let me
why
just
we ought
tell
to
you
raise
this.
the price.
Yeah, let me tell you this. I'm a person on fixed income, and that would make a big difference to me, $40 more. I know it sounds like it wouldn't, but people on fixed income, they are on fixed income, period.
People who play 20 rounds of golf a year, I'm just not in agreement.
I know.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. We can
Sometimes I just don't think the
$40.
council is that,
Could I ask a question?
we're
about-
not sensitive to people.
Let me ask a question. Have we ever introduced the need, or our option to have a capital investment in the VA property? As a part of this negotiation, discussion, whatever it is we're doing, the process is going to start in October. Have we ever introduced that fact of we need a longer term of this lease, we need different arrangements? If we're going to make a capital investment in this property, we're going to have something tied to it. Because I think if you were negotiating some improvements to a property, that uses somebody else's analogy, you're renting a house and you were going to do you would negotiate a firmer price or a more solid relationship than 30 days if you were going to make a capital investment. So have we done that, is the question.
Look, I remember doing this not too long after I came to the city, and I think David's done it since. He was just here, he stepped out, but I think we've entertained it. The problem is discussing this with the VA, and it's because it is not disparaging the VA. It's just in nobody's portfolio there. I mean, it's there, we run it. Nobody at VA really has responsibility for it, and nobody, is picking that up to do it. I can't really blame them. And so when you go back to talk about a lease, the best you can get is, maybe we'll do what we've done in the past, and that's good, but nobody's entertaining any other kind. So yes, it's been brought up. It's been brought up that we need to improve some things out there, because that trailer's not going to last very much longer at all. At some point, it's just not going to be habitable. And so,
What's it? Have we tried?
They won't take it.
Do we have the figures as to the patient usage out there? To me, I think there's a couple of caveats. One, the capital investment, but the extended or more use for their patients. That's their best interest to better serve the patients out there, their community. Those kind of things are something that might be a leverage that we would have to have it get their attention.
Sure.
And then maybe the thing is, since we have advocates, and it is a community advantage have these people, instead of calling their city council, and have them call their representatives and their senators, and maybe that's the kind of thing that we need to kind of, those people need to get somebody's attention that can make a decision that can help us in this process. Maybe
My point was, I've been through this already once. I was at the council when people came with their Save the VA t-shirts on, and I'm not saying to close the VA. So when I'm starting to get emails with people telling me that I'm for closing the VA, I never said that. So that's what I was just saying.
I never said you said that.
But
No one ever said close the VA.
Do I?
No one ever said close the
I
VA.
didn't say that.
I'm not arguing with you, Madeline. Madeline, hold on, let me finish. I didn't scream at you last time, I'm not screaming at you this time. What I'm trying to tell you is, we brought it to the council attention because of the budget. That's the only reason we brought it. I sit on the golf commission, that's why we brought it. Gary, have you not raised that trailer how many times?
Twice since it's been put in. Where it settled, we re-roofed the trailer because of the leaks.
Right.
Get on the microphone. People can hear you.
Thanks. Yes, since the trailer was actually put in some 17 years ago?
2003.
2003.
Can't do that kind of math.
It's settled a couple of times. We had to raise it up. We've had to put a new roof on it. They did have, the ice maker leaked one time. We've had roof leaks, but they had an ice maker leak. So over the years, we've had issues with it. The ADA requirements have changed since we put that in 17 years ago. In fact, I couldn't tell you that it complies today because we don't have adequate hard surface for ADA. That golf course would fall under the ADA requirements, and we don't have a cart out there to accommodate. To the best of my knowledge, we do have a cart over at Old Fort, but not there. We do have some exposure. We do need to make some upgrades. I'm not saying you have to put in a new trailer. We can limp along with what we got, but we would need to look at making some adjustments in case somebody that is physically challenged asks us to accommodate them.
But can I make one one point? This is not, Kurt serves on the golf commission. This has not gone to the golf commission. So any recommendation to spend money is going to have to come from the golf commission to the council for us to consider. It even being closed would have to come from the golf commission to the council unless we just wanted to bypass the golf commission and say we're going to close it. So I think what Angela has done is, the overriding thing we're going to have to consider is, when we built, a good example, the mountain bike trail park out, we had to spend significant expenses in the parking lot because we don't treat ourselves any different than we do XYZ person who's doing a project. So we don't allow portables or temporary trailers inside the city unless they go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which we've not ever done as a city out there that I know of. So, Providence Christian has got a new high school, and part of their requirements were you can get a C of O on your high school, but the portables have to be gone. You can't keep the portables, so we don't have sort of like what we have over at Redeemer right now or on Sulphur Springs where we've got portables that are there for 20 years. So the question that we're going to have as a council to make the decision, are we going to allow ourselves not to follow the same rules as we require of everybody else? And we require everyone in the city, you cannot have a gravel parking lot unless you're grandfathered in. I know a few. So what we're going to have to make the decision is if we're going to spend that money. But that's going to have to be a recommendation from y'all to the golf commission and then come into the city. And the recommendation from the golf commission, if they don't want to spend the money, then we have the opportunity that we can override that. Is that correct?
It is. We did actually meet with the Golf Commission just this morning, provided this information as an update, but did not ask for a recommendation or vote from them. Just let them know that we would be having this discussion today with council.
And I appreciate that, Mayor. I appreciate your comments. I'm not going to apologize to you or to anyone on the council for saying that I said the golf course is going to close. When I was asked, I told the people, yeah, probably so. That's what I said. But I respect your comments on that. And flipping the side of that, I would like for us to consider, if the VA does happen to close, that 1 or 2 days at Old Fort is set aside for senior citizens with that same pay that they have, that they can go out there and golf. Because if not, we're going to cut off a whole segment of people who, will cut off their recreation as far as golfing. And I would like for us as a council to, moving forward, to be more sensitive to people, to their feelings, and not so much, and I know this is a business, we have to run the business like we have to run it, but we have to, when we come to the money of people, we need to be in the needs, we need to be a little more sensitive to people than we are to the dollar. I would just like to see that, because when you think about it, and when you look at the makeup of this council, none of you all have seen a homeless person walk in your neighborhood. I guarantee you. If you did, you would probably freak out. Well, you now will, but you just moved.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
where you were,
That's true.
no homeless people. You don't see that.
That's true.
You don't see police cars in your neighborhood, hovering around. No offense to you, but you don't see that in the neighborhoods that you live in. I see that. So I'm just saying, there are two sets of people, the haves and the haves not in Murfreesboro, and we need to consider everybody. That's what
Still
I'm,
talking about the golf course.
Yeah, so I think, Madeline, what you're asking for has to come, if there's going to be any changes at Old Fort, that has to come from the Golf Commission
right.
to us. So I think that would be, if you're passionate about that, I think that would be where you would want to go to a Golf Commission meeting and address the Golf Commission and talk with them about that.
I appreciate that, Mayor. I'm done. Let's move on to the next subject.
Yeah, I appreciate the information you've brought.
Thank you, Angela.
I think when that comes back from the Golf Commission, then, we can talk through those discussions. And Madeline, this may be a moot point if the VA comes back and just says, we're not, the Trump administration put a focus on VA with VA improvements. The Biden administration has carried that on. So if they come through and say, we're going to expand to X, Y, and Z on that property, I mean, it may be a moot point if they're going to expand the hospital out there.
Mayor and council, I'm going to be fine with whatever decision we make, but I'm going to always give my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm the renegade up here, remember?
Well,
That's okay, I'm good. I'd rather have a good name, a name than not a name at all,
all right. I think that's probably a good segue to go into. We wanted to have on the agenda the council charter role. So, Adam, I'm going to turn that over to you to be legal with us.
Sure. Mayor, members of council, I provided to you in your agenda packet some excerpts from the city charter regarding the role of city council and city manager, specifically when it comes to employment and personnel matters. And the document I provided to you was highlighted in two different colors, with green indicating those that clearly established a role for city council, and yellow indicating those that clearly designated or designated the city manager as having the power or authority to make certain decisions. I'm going to do a quick overview of how those policy or how those sections of the charter work together. First thing to know is that the legislative and policy-making powers of the city, except as otherwise provided in the charter itself, are vested in the city council. The charter also grants city council the power and duty to appoint what I'm going to call the senior officers of the city, namely the city manager, the city attorney, the city recorder, the city treasurer, and the city judge. City council also has, under the charter, has the authority and the obligation to set the salary and compensation for these positions and for all other officers and employees of the city. But under the charter, the city manager has exclusive, or as we say in the legal world, plenary power to appoint, discipline, and remove department directors and all subordinate officers and employees, provided such decisions are consistent with the charter, general policies adopted by council, and applicable state and federal law. In fact, the charter specifically states in section 37, and I'm going to read this because I think it's really kind of one of the main points here, quote, that neither the city council nor any of its members shall dictate the appointment of any person to office or employment by the city manager, or in any manner interfere with him or her, or prevent him or her from exercising his own judgment in the appointment of officers and employees in the administrative service of the city. And administrative service there just refers to basically all the city employees. Except for the purpose of inquiry, the council and its members shall deal with the administrative service of the city solely through the city manager, and neither the council nor any member thereof shall give orders to any of the subordinates of the city manager, either publicly or privately. So, what does this mean when it comes to the council's role in employment and personnel matters? And I've boiled it down to a few key points here. So first, in terms of legislation, City Council can establish general policies. So examples of those might be, or are, equal employment opportunity policies, how staff handles employee complaints, class and compensation policies, retirement policies, policies governing the disciplining of employees, and the policies governing hiring, promotion, and transfer. Again, these are general policies, so when I speak about discipline, it's about the policy governing the disciplining of employees, not how a particular employee is disciplined. Same thing is, an employee complaint. It's not about how a particular employee's complaint is handled necessarily, but it is how complaints should be handled by staff. City Council also has the authority under the charter to establish departments and fund those departments. It has the authority to establish salaries and other benefits for employees. And these last two, those last two powers really are the power of the purse, which resides with City Council. Consistent with Section 37, which was the part of the charter that I quoted to you, City Council can request information from city employees. That's the purpose of inquiry referenced in Section 37. And it doesn't necessarily, it's not limited to, just requesting information from the city manager. But I would say, as a best practice, it's generally good to loop in the city manager or the city attorney, city recorder, the assistant city manager, or executive director for the following reason. It avoids the problem of an employee perceiving that a council member is directing the employee to take any action other than provide the information requested. And again, that direction is, whether it's actual or perceived, is where things might get problematic. Finally, it's City Council's role to enforce the policies that it adopts, to make sure that they're being properly implemented, and to supervise the execution of the duties designated or assigned to the city manager, the city attorney, the city recorder, the city treasurer, and the city judge. And that may be the execution of those duties in general, or there may be something that is so significant that it raises a concern, that one particular instance raises a particular concern with regard to how one of those 5 employees, or it's, in practice it's been 4, but those 4 employees execute those duties. So what can council members do individually? What can they do collectively to enforce policies and supervise the execution of duties by the city's senior leadership? One is to consult with one of those 4 individuals. Might be a little problematic kind of consulting with the city judge about a case. Probably should not do that. But how the judge operates city court, that would be within your purview. You have the, as an individual council member, you have the authority to make public statements, whether it's at a council meeting or elsewhere, about concerns about how something is being handled by one of the senior appointed city officials. Those are really the only 2 powers you each have as individuals, as council members. These last four, though, are ones that you collectively hold as a city council. One would be to, way of enforcing policies and supervising the execution of duties is to conduct performance reviews and evaluations of those employees that report directly to you. While this is not spelled out directly in the charter, it is widely recognized as within the purview of legislative authorities generally, is that you have the authority to investigate concerns as a body. So if you have concerns about a way a policy is being implemented, whether universally or in a specific instance, it's within the scope of council's authority to appoint an outside counsel or to direct the city attorney or someone else to investigate a matter. Collectively, you have the authority to publicly reprimand or censure one of those employees that you have the authority to appoint. And finally, you have the authority to terminate one of those employees that you appoint. That's it in a nutshell. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Kurt wants to know if he can reprimand me for talking too much. Can he censure me? Just one or
We can censure you, I think, but he cannot.
He could censure him, right? Just by him.
I have an example to ask you.
Sure.
Say, for instance, an employee was terminated, and they felt like wrongfully, which a lot of you terminate me, of course, I'm going to feel like I'm right. So, but let's say that happens. That employee can file a complaint or whatever. Now, before the employee is terminated, I'm sure it has to go through their supervisor, and then it goes to the city manager for approval, right?
Yes, for termination, the practice, the course it usually follows is that there's a recommendation from a department director. That recommendation goes to the city manager. The city manager is the only person that has the authority under the charter to terminate an employee, other than the four people that are appointed by city council. And then at that point in time, usually what happens is the city manager will state whether he or she is inclined to accept that recommendation, but also inform the employee that they, under city policy and in fact under a due process clause of the 14th Amendment, to have a due process hearing before that termination, which is basically an opportunity to tell their side of the story.
Right.
If they go through that hearing process, the employee then has the city manager will make a decision. If the termination recommendation is upheld, the employee is terminated. The employee can generally, or if it's a non-probationary employee, that employee can appeal that decision to the city's disciplinary review board, which consists of 7 members that are appointed by city council. None of them are city employees. None of them hold any other city office with the city. But in addition to that, they also have other legal remedies. If they're alleging discrimination of some sort, they could file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission or the Tennessee Human Rights Commission.
Okay. So after it goes through the step, it goes to the city manager, then If they want to appeal, it goes through all the steps, and then it comes back to the city manager.
No, if it goes to the city manager decides that the employee is terminated, the employee is terminated, they then have the right to disciplinary, a hearing before the disciplinary review board. If the employee, if the disciplinary review board upholds that determination, the termination stands subject to any remedies they might have under federal and state law. If they reverse that decision, then the employee, and I apologize, I don't have it completely off the top of my head, but essentially the employee would be reinstated in the position, or it might be that it would be that the level of discipline is reduced from termination to something else.
I'd like to see sometimes in the future that we establish some type of civil service board to help employees out. Yeah.
Don't know, something other than the disciplinary review board and there's already something in place that is for employees to appeal, is that right?
That's right, it's in the charter.
What else this kind of came from what comments that you made the other night, is you made mention that you want to change the charter. Mm-hmm. What do you want? You want to change the charter to where we're involved in employee-specific?
Right. Well, I personally feel that the city manager has too much authority. And we can't, according to what you read and what's in the charter, we can't touch the city manager as a group, as a council. He has to say so, that's the final say so. Employees can't talk to me, can't talk to him without getting spanked. And that's wrong. We have employees walking on eggshells because they are afraid to tell what's going on or how they are treated. And they're the backbone of the city. And not that you're sitting there, this can be any city manager. Under this charter, they just have too much authority over us. And we are over them. But then I'm told, well, you can't do nothing. That's Craig, he has to handle that. That's Sarah, she has to handle that. That has to change in the charter. At some point, the council, since the city manager answers to us, per se, we have to have more authority right now. And I know the biggest problem, council, is that we do not evaluate our city manager. He has no, not you, Craig, I'm just saying any city manager. We don't even evaluate them. We don't know if they're doing a good job, and then one of the questions in the evaluation one time, how does he act around, how does he get along with employees, how does he communicate? How can I answer that when I'm not allowed to even talk to an employee per se? So maybe no one sees what I see.
So is there a difference between talking to employees and becoming involved in hiring and firing and putting pressure on employees? So personally, my opinion on this, and I'll go ahead and get this out of the way because it's been bothering me since you brought it up. My opinion, look, whether you think any city manager has too much authority, not enough, whatever, for the city council, elected officials to be involved in employment decisions, not policies, that's exactly where we should be involved, in my opinion. But, if I don't like Nate, I saw he was looking down. But I just decide, well, I got a problem with Nate, and I'm going to start putting pressure on Angela, and I'm going to start putting pressure on Craig and anybody else, and putting real pressure on Nate to say, you're out. Well, that doesn't necessarily, is not a reflection of anything that has to do with human resources, with good reasoning, with anything. It's just, I'm elected and I think I've got the power to be able to put pressure on employees one way or the other. Or the other way is if Nate gets fired, and I decide I really like Nate, and I didn't want him to get fired. And I start putting pressure on people for him getting fired, whether there was good reason or not. The policy should take care of that, which is we got to have policies in place that mean you go through procedures to make sure that people don't get fired for no reason or that people get hired for good reason. I mean, Pam, I think it was somebody in her office. I can't remember if I talked to Pam about this or not, but somebody who recently applied for a job at the city listed me as a reference, and so somebody from her office called me and I kind of said, hey, look, that's not what I need to be doing. I have known this person a really long time. That's about all I think I need to tell you. Why don't you go back and look at the other references and get that information somewhere else so that I'm not the one sitting here saying, yeah, you ought to be hiring this person, because I don't think it's our role. So I will tell you that I think we should not change it to where we're in the middle of hiring and firing decisions, that we let the HR folks and the city manager have that authority. I'll listen to what everybody else says, but the council.
I don't disagree with hiring and firing. I'm saying how the employees, what recourse do they have when they feel like they're being mistreated? What recourse do they have?
Well, that's a policy that, I think that's a policy kind of a thing. If we have a policy in place, I'll tell you that you said you want to change the charter, which may take a change of charter to have some sort of something like that in play. And what I'm telling you is, I will say this, I don't want to go too deep in this, but it has bothered me. We all sit up here, took an oath to follow the charter, and we've all not changed the charter, and to say that you're willing to break the law or whatever, misdemeanor or felony or whatever. That's just too much for me personally. I'm good with reviewing policies that we have in place for people who want to have, if we see that there's some need for a second disciplinary review board or some second level of that. I don't know if that's something that Pam would recommend from an HR standpoint or something like that, then, I'll certainly listen to that.
Do you mind if I address one of the questions that Ms. Harris made? And that, I think the distinction, I think it's important to recognize that legally, an employee contacting a council member and saying, I don't feel I'm being treated fairly, or I feel like I'm being discriminated against, or, is a legally protected activity under Tennessee law. It's called the Tennessee Public Employees Political Freedom Act, which means that if an employee contacts one of you and says, hey, the city attorney, who's my boss, is, calling me all kinds of nasty names, or
Not treating you fairly.
Then that person, the city cannot retaliate against that employee for making that complaint. It means they can't take an adverse employment action against that employee because they made a complaint. There may be another reason why there's disciplinary action might be appropriate, but it can't be because they made that complaint. And so, and so that action is protected. Also, I think, but the issue is when it becomes a sticky wicket, when a council member would start to try to, and this is what the charter seeks to prevent, to try to intervene with that employee's supervisor directly. What the charter says is that that when that complaint comes into a council member, that should be directed to the city manager. Now, it's also or Alternatively, I think it would be appropriate if you believe it's something illegal to report that to the city attorney. So it's okay to receive it. Employees should know that they can't be retaliated against for reporting a complaint about their working conditions or about a colleague's working condition or a term of their employment. But there's also what I've heard is there are some people who have concerns about the types of information that might be shared that is not directly related to a particular individual's circumstance. It's not a complaint. It's not something. It doesn't constitute protected activity under state law or federal law. It is information that might be somewhat confidential, or at least, if not confidential, sensitive, that probably should not be, an employee should not be disclosing absent a public records request. So that's the careful line. Like, if there are if a council member were to call me, there might be information that is legally sensitive that because of a particular circumstance, I might not be in a position to tell you at that moment. Or if someone called a legal assistant in my office and she knew the information, but she doesn't have the authority to disclose it. So that person should not be contacted for that information. That person should come to me.
So if we ask, routinely we will see department heads or, I think I've said this is if I send an email to a department head, I'll CC Craig and say, what about this question? But what happens if we get put in the situation where what Madeline was asking, that you have an employee that comes to you to say, I don't like my director, or I don't like my department head? I mean, we need to say, thank you for coming and telling me that. Let's go take you to the city manager, or let's go talk with the city manager. But say that we don't do that, and say that we get involved in it and we say, well, let's go find out what's going on. What happens if it does get to the point that there is a termination, and as a council member, we're involved in those discussions? I mean, what legal liability do I have, or what legal liability does the city have?
I mean, you're presenting me with a hypothetical, so I may not cover all the bases of potential issues. One is going to be messy. I mean, just practically, that's not even legally, just practically it could be messy. Two, if you're involved in something and you're influencing a decision of the city manager on a termination, and that termination violates federal law, it's possible that you could be personally liable for having, discriminating on a protected class, race, gender, religion, something like that. So that you could become, so that's where you could potentially become a party to a lawsuit. Then there's the potential that you could become a witness to a lawsuit, and you have a situation where, and there are good reasons why this might happen. I would hope this would never happen, but there could be a situation where a council member feels that a director or the city manager or the city attorney handled something incorrectly, and they're called to testify, and they're going to testify to something that is to not in the city's favor. But their obligation is to tell the truth and to tell their beliefs. And so that is a situation that could arise. if once a city council member becomes involved in day-to-day employment decisions, hiring and firing of an employee other than those 4 or 5 individuals or 4 or 5 positions listed in the charter.
That was just my question about being in, we had one, I think this was back in, Melissa can answer this, but we had a council member back, this was before my time, that went to federal court, right? Was,
I'm not sure I remember.
I was not here, but I am familiar with that instance.
yeah.
Could I ask a question? Because it may, this, I mean, we've talked about from our perspective, what is the responsible thing to do, but think of, I'd like to have a little clarification as to the protocol. I'm an employee, and I have an issue with something and how I was handled. And I went to my director, or I went to my supervisor, and I didn't get any answers that, are empathy for what was going on. Where do I go as an employee that doesn't feel like I'm getting my concerns addressed through the chain of command? What alternatives, and maybe Craig can answer this, what alternatives do I have as an employee to address my concerns that I don't feel the chain of command is addressing?
Well, I appreciate the question. So let me just say, it is my expectation, and I think every executive director on down that works, an assistant city manager, that every supervisor in this organization, every manager, every director, executive director, assistant city manager, and myself, that we will listen to what employees have to say. If an employee comes directly to me or to any the other level of authority, I think the first question would be, have you talked with the other people, depending on the circumstances. There may be circumstances where it doesn't make sense to talk to your direct supervisor because they are an issue or something else. And so, but that would be probably the first question, is you talked through the other levels, just to get an understanding of what's been done and who may or may not be involved. And then the circumstances are so varied to address it at whatever level it needs to be addressed at, whether it needs to be assigned back to. If a line employee came to me and said, no, I haven't talked to my department director, and it was a circumstance that had to do with scheduling, making up something, I'd say, well, you need to talk to your manager, you need to talk to your director. And I think but everybody has an open door, so you can jump ship if you want. I mean, jump over the logical chain of command if you want and talk to them. I think you may find yourself going back in the chain of command, again, depending on the circumstances. We have, speaking organizationally, we have over 14,000 employees, 1,400 employees. Yeah. 1,400, yeah. Well, hopefully not ever that, but 1,400 employees, full and part-time. I think organizationally speaking, it's impossible to assume that somebody isn't going to have a notion that their job isn't, being done the way that, or they're not being allowed to do their job or whatever that they expect it to be done. I think that's, and so I would expect that we would entertain the complaints as they come up. I will tell you, sometimes employees have a complaint that isn't legitimate and can't be organizationally addressed in the manner that they want. That happens. That's a lot of people to have a lot of opinions that sometimes you're going to find just on a percentage basis they're wrong. Now, they may or may not accept that, and they may have that complaint that festers with them, and we'll have to address that from a management standpoint as we go forward. But there is no process that we could ever dream up that would eliminate and make every single person absolutely positively happy every single time. And so what we have is a process, I think, that's in place that is working very well. We do not have a substantial amount of either terminations or appeals of serious discipline to the Disciplinary Review Board. We haven't had one, I think, in a long time. We have one, and then, in the 5 years I've been here, I think there's really been one that's taken to the Disciplinary Review Board. That's available at any time when you're seriously disciplined. You can take it to the Disciplinary Review Board. So I get very few that come to my level. Generally, they're handled at the department level. So I don't think we have a process where employees are afraid to raise issues. Are there some that are out there? That's possible. Again, we have 1,400 people that have a different opinion, so I can't answer for every one of them. But I do think that we have a process that does well. We don't have, a mass exodus. We are going to have people who have differing opinions on how they should be treated or how their job should be done or what they should be paid even. And they will issue complaints. My expectation would be that, and there's no moratorium on talking to council. If somebody wants to talk to council, or if council wants to get information, there's nothing out there that suggests that council can't do that or that employees can't call council members. My expectation is that there would be a respect for the process that's there, that a council person would send the person back into that process if they haven't followed it, and that we'll see how the situation turns out. There's always a lot of factors in every complaint. There's always another side of the story. There's always more detail. That's why we have lawyers that are involved in employment situations. We have an entire professional HR department that handles these. To have, council members who are not part of the day-to-day organization of the city to make a judgment about what's happening in individual employment is impossible to have a good, solid decision being made by that person.
Can I, this is the setting for workshop that I think, because I want to throw something out just for a suggestion, and it's not a refined idea, but it's something out of the experience that I had years ago as a PTO president at the schools. Because I had people come to me, did you hear what so-and-so did? What happened here? And all this kind of stuff. And I thought every time I walked into school, I had to hit somebody. Somebody had something they wanted to tell me. And I thought, how can I responsibly handle what really took place and to do anything about somebody's complaint about something? And I think it would help us to find a place when somebody comes to us as council and we don't know what to do, and you have empathy for whatever they're saying, or you want to at least listen to them. Now, listen, I came up with a form called the Bright Idea Form, and I made 150 of them, and I gave out 50. Every time somebody said something that happened that needed to take place or needed attention, I said, here, fill out one of these for me. And it basically said, your explanation as to what the problem is, your idea about who do you think is involved in addressing this situation, and then what would you do to solve this situation? And I think, like I said, I gave out 50. I think I got 5 of them returned to me. But I got 5 answers that had some plan to address people's concern as to what was going on. And I also had a piece of paper that told me what the problem was. And it wasn't somebody in a phone call or somebody that stopped me in the hall at City Hall. And I did, because I knew what the problem was, and I saw I got a clear idea as to how they felt about it. And quite honestly, Madeline, it gave them an opportunity to get something off their chest.
Well, I
And
understand
it was
that.
a practical way of addressing the situation. Yes, there'll be people that don't have the right information or they've misconstrued somebody's intention for something that was said to them. But you know specifically what it is. And if they care enough to fill out a form that basically tells me what the problem is and how they would address it and who needs to be involved in the decision-making, it gave us something to deal with as opposed in a practical sense, because quite honestly, when I just hear something, the next time I hear, somebody calls you about an issue and then they call me, well, they didn't tell you and me the same thing. And I don't really understand what the problem is. So when somebody calls us, well, you got an issue, can you fill out one of these forms for me? Or this, and I don't know if that's even realistic to even consider something from Human Resources.
Are you talking about specific to HR issues, or are you talking about just like, hey, I think we ought to
Well, I
have
don't
a
know.
runway?
Well, I don't know that it wouldn't be a bad idea to hear what the community says, because if they're expecting
We get
wisdom from
those.
just the seven of us, I'd rather see, it might involve the community a little bit more in some other things too. But
There probably needs to be a
Strengthen it.
separate one for HR, so we keep all
Well,
the employees.
that's why I thought of it as it probably needs to be, bone needs to be chewed on a little bit more, Pam, before you figure out how to do it. But if somebody has a concern and they worry about, I can't tell my supervisor because I don't want to change and jeopardize that relationship with them, am I willing to fill out this form? And do I care enough about it getting, having something? And well, if they don't, I don't know how we can responsibly address that. Just because somebody says, I want to stir the pot.
It's the way the employees have been treated, Bill. You're not going to get anybody that's just going to come and say something.
Can I
That's
jump
not
in?
going to happen.
Let me make a comment, and this is really a hard issue. It's hard for us, I think, to comment on some of these things because we're not setting day-to-day policy, I think, to do some of that. So from a vision standpoint, let me just give you kind of my perspective on this. It's really, really important that we trust each other. That's not always easy. It's really, really important that we trust the employees that we hire. That's not always easy. But it's really important that exists because it's really hard to work together if we don't do that. It's also really important that the employees that report directly to council trust the executive directors and on down. That has to work that way at every level of what we do. Part of what Bill's talking about and part of what Madeline's talking about is so hard is we sometimes get things that come to us and maybe we have a hard time differentiating between complaints. We got police officers here, so I say, all police officers are mean or bad or they do bad things and they pull people over. None of us want that in the community, right? And I think our police officers don't do that, so we're lucky. But we could also have another scenario where we say we have a complaint about a police officer that maybe used language. Well, maybe it's appropriate or not appropriate to use language. Maybe that's acceptable in some scenarios. Maybe it's not acceptable in others. But you have to be able to divide those things between actual complaints that are problems that have to be addressed and operational issues, policy-related issues, how we can be better and how we can do better. If an employee comes to us, sometimes we don't know the difference between a complaint and an operational issue. We talked about the 18 police officers that were topped out. So, is that a complaint or is that an operational issue? It's probably an operational issue. It's something that we've got a pay plan in place that has pigeonholed them, but that's not Craig's fault per se, and it's not the city of Murfreesboro's fault per se. But it is our responsibility to say, hey, we don't want that to exist, so maybe we do something different moving forward. Well, one of the things that I think, and this is just, again, my vision, I think if employees felt like, and this is really challenging, and I'm sure everybody makes the best effort. I think we try to make the best effort at council. I think staff does this. You have to give people the benefit of the doubt. But if people feel like they're being listened to and they have an audience and they have a place to come and say freely what they want to say without repercussion, you generally get more trust within the organization, and I think you get easier lines to delineate between complaints and policy or operational issues. And so I think it's tough because it's going to always be hard for us to know exactly where those lines are, which is intentionally why we're supposed to stay out of them. Having said that, I do think there's some things we could do better in terms of providing confidence so that whether it be us that have confidence that we need to have in staff and executive directors. Adam brought up 4 things we could do with the employees that work for us. We talked about evaluations. Thank you, Bill. Sorry. We don't do that. We should probably do that. I don't know why we don't do that, but we should probably do that. If something comes up and we have a very hard issue, we should be able to talk about it in front of council. That's what we're here to do. That's why we're supposed to be doing that. So we should do it if it comes up. But I think giving employees an opportunity to provide feedback where they feel safe providing feedback not only gives us the opportunity to make sure we feel good when an employee comes to us, that there are some assurances in place that they know, hey, there's a difference between a legitimate complaint you may be filing and an operational issue that you do not like. But it also allows us to support staff in the sense that we're getting feedback, and what we know is, whether it be Craig or Adam or Melissa or anybody else, here's the feedback we've given, here's what we've done, we're tracking that, there's some accountability, there's some documentation associated with that. It's what all of us would want in anything that we do. And the employee survey is what comes to my mind, but that's because that's my background. But employee surveys saying, you know, I feel like I'm appreciated at work. I feel like I'm treated fairly at work. I feel like I'm listened to. I feel like I can be honest without being fired. I think those things go a long way, if for nothing else than just people being given the opportunity to comment on that. So my heart goes out to, you know, Madam, because I think what I know about her is that she feels for employees when they feel like that they're being mistreated. I believe that. I think sometimes, to Craig's point, what's really difficult is it an actual complaint or is it an operational issue that they're unhappy about? And I think it gets really fuzzy when we try to step into those lanes. So I think the reviews are good, the evaluations are good. I don't know why we're not doing it. I think we should be. The employee surveys, getting feedback from employees on, you know, whether or not they like working for the city of Murfreesboro, why they work for the city of Murfreesboro, what do they think about their direct supervisor, what do they think about the council, what do they think about the city manager. I think those are all good things. Why would we not want that information?
We also have to set some expectations for what comes out of that. I mean, if we go down that road, you know, I mean, like I've been thinking since our last meeting, you know, there were a group of kind of one subset of employees that were at our last meeting, you know, a pretty large group of them, which, you know, kind of makes me start thinking as you know, what you're talking about. If people were filling out surveys with some of the comments that I heard and some of the before and after and all that was, you know, there may be a culture issue in that department. Right. Which, you know, if all those people are filling out, say, same survey saying there's some sort of an issue and there's no global force to that, you know, maybe at least you kind of look at that and kind of everybody really knows up here there's a global force that's making filling those positions difficult. That's really not the case in the group that was there the other night. I mean, there's no global force, but there seems to be some sort of turnover problem. We seem to be at least within the pretty decent range of pay, frankly. I mean, from everything I can tell, we're at least pretty close. So maybe it's a culture thing. Maybe the leadership needs to be looking at different ways to deal with those employees and having some conference calls on Monday mornings and getting some of those things out on the table and dealing with it, you know. But those are the kinds of things that have to be the end result of the survey. That I think, you know, as it relates to this conversation right here, and I'm fine. We've done evaluations in the past of the city manager role, and we can do them of all the roles of our 4 employees. I got no problem with it. I had a little bit of a problem with the way they were done in the past because they seemed to be pretty doggone meaningless in the end, and I hate wasting time on stuff. But whatever, we can go down a 16-question list and fill it out. But I'm good with doing that too. I'm perfectly fine, and we can go back and find an old one or whatever, and just start filling them out. I'm totally good with that. I'm okay with the idea of the survey as long as there's a process at the end, and as it relates to today's conversation, the process at the end isn't us trying to determine every individual complaint that comes in. I mean, you know, the board of directors they stay out of that for good reason, right? I mean, there's just good reasons why elected officials especially should probably stay primarily out once it kind of gets past that level. But if we can get some of that stuff into into a bigger picture thing where Craig is saying, okay, hey, look, we see that there's a culture issue in this area. Here's what they're going to do to try to rectify it. They're going to start having conference calls on Monday mornings at 7:30, and they're going to talk about what needs to be talked about, what the feedback was, and how they're going to fix it. Okay? It doesn't need to be me on the phone trying to figure out how to fix somebody's issue. And, look, I'll be, just real honest. Somebody's got to say this. A lot of the complaints, if you want to call them complaints or organizations, many of them, frankly, have substantial inaccuracies. And that's really a bummer because it detracts from the ones that need the attention.
That's always going to be the case.
And it's always going to be the case. And it's never going to be the case that the people who also have other jobs and are the least involved in the day-to-day activity should be the ones making the determination of what piece of that is accurate and what piece of it is it.
And we're all trying to do it independently of each other, so.
Yeah, and look, I'll be the first. Look, we all get questions from employees. We all get questions. We all get policy suggestions, informally, just not on a piece of paper. And so, I'm game with that kind of deal. Look, even better if you're saying this is the route to go through. No need to email the council members or call. You've got an avenue to do this.
To me,
we're going to see the results.
That would give something firm, and you got a clear understanding and a common understanding of what, at least expression of what the problem is.
Overall, we've been focused for years, and I think, I think we've seen this now. That's what
You asked Pam?
Well, yeah, so what we've seen for years has been money. That's what we're focused on. We're looking at the pay plan, we're looking at class and comp, and we're looking at it, but really it's money, insurance, and retirement. Those
Which is all money.
Right, so that's what we look at. And I think as we've evolved, a lot of it has been through COVID. I run a small business, I have 5 employees. If Brandy, who works with me, calls me on Monday morning and says, hey, Christopher has got a graduation thing at 9 o'clock, I don't go through a form process. I say, sure, don't miss your family thing. I'll see you later. And so we're going to have to find a way, and this would be my question to Pam, as an organization, we have to do better to recognize that, especially with millennials now, that it's not all about what the pay is. It's about the environment. Or, as Ashley says with the people she deals with, it's about the experience. It's not about having the big house and the big yard. It's about being able to maybe have a smaller place and being able to travel more, So maybe what we're talking about and what we're asking is that Pam and Craig have that avenue where we can get employee feedback. A while back we did employee roundtables, but then we set that up, but then the employees didn't feel comfortable that they could say what they wanted to in those roundtables. So maybe there's a mechanism as we move forward, especially in this next 6 months as we talk about class and talk about pay, that we look at what are your intrinsic benefits that maybe we're not offering right now to be able to have that voice, to be able to have that flexibility. We're going to have to talk about allowing people to work from home, and I'm fine with that. If we've got someone who can do their job and that gets to where maybe that alleviates some space issues, why wouldn't we look at that? So, maybe it would be good if, listening to everything we've talked about, if you all have suggestions, maybe get those to Craig, who can get those to Pam, but come back with an employee retention program or a way that people can have a formal process that doesn't get us involved to where we're being liable for something that we tell the employee. Because the first thing we want to tell the employee when they come to us is, that sounds like a problem. Let me get involved in that. We'll try to fix it. When we really probably shouldn't do that. And it's just human nature that we want to get involved and fix it. So if y'all will come back to us and give us the ability to have those other things, it sounds like that's what I'm hearing, that we want to be able to have that avenue. If there's an issue, we've got the ability to be able to get data coming back. Madeline had talked about, the exit interviews with people who are leaving, and maybe that is, we don't need to see the individual people, but maybe you do come back with information to us that says, based on these surveys, here's why some people in this segment, they're leaving. you know, the idea I talked about yesterday is on CDL drivers specifically, you know, we may have to look at employee leasing when we're looking for people to drive trucks or do works. We may have to look at companies where we're leasing employees that we can't hire. We know we're going to be paying more, but if that's what it takes to get the jobs filled, you know, so can y'all please come back with some progressive ideas for us?
Yep, we'll take a look
I
at it.
say, look, I mean, look, while we're at it, let's, Pam, I mean, do y'all want to just go ahead and get this knocked out on the evaluation deal? I mean, I typically am decent about letting Craig know when I think there's something that I wish.
For everybody.
So, hey, I can go.
Collectively, it'd be good.
That's what I mean. And,
Yeah.
and we don't benefit from the questions you ask or the knowledge gained by the questions that you ask. And so, I mean, I think it raises everybody here if we're a part of that process together. And look, it's easy for me to say, y'all been through it, I hadn't been through it.
Yeah.
So, but
I remember the first time we evaluated Mr. Haley, God rest in peace, that you talking about uncomfortable evaluating Mr. Haley. You know, that was a big discussion back 15 years ago when we were talking about evaluating, you know, the city manager. And then we went through and, you know, we had CTAS come in to try to come up with an evaluation. At the time, it was Mr. Lyons. And so, I mean, I would rather, if y'all are okay with this, there's no way to come up with a rating schedule to talk about how they're doing a good job. Maybe it's just where we sit down in a setting like this. We have to do it all publicly, and we just can ask questions. Hey, where are we on a more of an open dialogue? So if you've got whoever's got a problem with the way Craig's doing something, or the city manager, not the position, then let's just talk about it and have a special meeting that's just on evaluating, here are things that one council member would like to see improve, and then the entire council can say, no, I think that they're fine with that. We can try to come up with some kind of written form, but there is no perfect form to be able, like, one thing is how active is the city manager in the community? Well, my opinion, the city manager technically shouldn't be. That's our job to be active in the community. It's our job. It's not the city manager's job to be on the front page of the paper every day. And Craig has done a good job, I'd say publicly. He said that's the city council's role. And so maybe that's the city council says, look, we're okay with you not, going to Rotary clubs, or we want you to live in the community, but we don't expect you to be the face of Murfreesboro. That's what we do as an elected official. So let's set that up, if y'all are okay, and we'll have those discussions with him. And if we have an issue that we want to talk about, but council members are going to have to be able to have the tough discussions with that person sitting there.
There were always all kinds of questions on there that really boiled down to, you really don't know the answer to them necessarily. I mean, as it relates to some of these things we've been talking about today. In HR, if I remember, there was always 3 or 4 HR questions on there. And you feel like if you've heard 2 complaints or 2 people have called you about something, all right, is he a 1, a 2, a 3, or 4, or a 5 on the scale? I mean, I
It was
don't
a
know.
popularity survey.
It was a little bit like this. That makes it tough. I mean, so that's what I say. I don't love the way that that whole thing. But look, to me, maybe something just that would have an open dialogue sounds like a good idea to me. And if there was just, if there's 4 categories, maybe that helps stimulate a little discussion on some things that we think are the important categories. I don't know.
We could put together, Pam, you do this, but, financial, we could say the things that the council wants to talk about, financial, employees. I mean, so you can easily come up with something that we could have discussion points that if there's a weakness that the city manager has, then once it's in that category, we can easily say this is an area where I feel like there needs to be improvement.
And if we decide to do the survey for the employees, I'd like to see us go through a firm so they can be honest with their answers.
Make it anonymous.
So we won't know, and let the firm tell us the answers, so they'll feel comfortable answering the questions. Because if they know it's coming from solid waste or this, you don't have to know who, but solid waste, somebody is complaining. That's just my suggestion.
Is there a
Are you
way?
not going through HR now?
If they
I'm
have,
just saying,
Pam, is there an
I just want
avenue,
them to be totally comfortable answering the question.
is there an avenue for a person to anonymously file a complaint or to say there's some issue?
Right now, we don't have, we have a process by which people file complaints, but it's not, but it's formal because it's in a policy. And there's a practice, but it's not, it doesn't all get filtered in one place. Again, it depends on if it's, if it relates to the department and is it something to do with their work? Or is it discrimination and harassment? Or is there one funnel? We do have the ability to do it. We have and I think me and Craig talked about it, we have a compliance line right now that people can report in on anonymously or with a name that talks about if it's fraud or if it's a safety violation. That's another avenue that you could do for these types of problems as well, that you can call the number or you can put it in, but it captured all the data in one spot.
In either case, it seems to me like every 6 months or every year or something like that, that we probably just, if there's some mechanism for collecting that stuff, whatever that mechanism is, whether it's a survey or whether it's one of the mechanisms we already have in place, that every 6 months or a year, maybe it's during the evaluation, I don't know, maybe because it could be very separate. It could be very, isolated to a department, somewhere over here. That's something I'm assuming.
Now, we do have the data. If you wanted to look back at, how many complaints did we get last year? Was it in a certain category? Was it,
some little report that just sort of tells us that.
We can report that out without names and
And I'm not just
all of
talking
that.
about complaints too, because I don't want that to be the focus. I know you're not
Yeah.
either. I'm talking about, as everybody knows, a lot of the best ideas come from the field, from people that are actually working in a job day to day. There are all kinds of things that would benefit from employee surveys, not just complaints. It's not about that.
No, as far as employee surveys go, we can do them internally through SurveyMonkey so that we don't necessarily know the names, but we would want to know departments. To somebody's point here, if you want to decipher, is there a department that has an area problem versus, citywide. You can also use firms. Ideally, if you use a firm, you want to look at questions citywide, questions departmentally, so you can focus on what can we do as a whole organization, what do we need to concentrate on in different departments because they're different things.
So do we feel comfortable, we have two options. We can either let Pam do Craig. We can't direct Pam to do anything. We can direct Craig to tell Pam to do something. So,
See what they say.
yeah, all right. So, but do y'all feel comfortable having Craig and Pam work through some kind of employee feedback avenue where, maybe it's on the website, an employee can go log into the portal and they can send feedback at any given time outside of, a survey, but that we either come up with that retention piece and feedback piece, or we can change the charter. It's one of the two. So we need to give them feedback on whether we want to go through a process of changing the charter, which means we vote to change the charter. That has to go to the General Assembly. The General Assembly has to vote to change the charter, or we go this other route. So
I kind of see where I'm at on it.
Yeah, I don't think we're trying to change the charter.
I think it's very prudent to go this process and work our way up and see if this works and see if this is a better process that serves the need that we have and makes our organization better.
Okay. I think, y'all, if you could come back with, we need something that will give us, and this just needs to be an overall discussion over the next 6 months on, really, we talk about, the buzzword now is culture, that we really need to talk about our overall culture. 70% of our firefighters right now have been here less than 5 years. They're younger individuals who are here, so we can't manage someone who's in their 20s the way we're managing someone who's in their 50s, and we need to work through that. Does anybody have anything else on this? Because I have one more thing. We have actually a couple things under other business. The dashboard, if you have any questions for Aaron, All right, seeing none, we'll move to wine sales certificate. Sorry. Sam texted me during the radio show this morning. I think Costco has announced their date of July 20th that they're going to open. So as people ask you, July 20th is Costco. So you have their wine permit in front of you. Is there anything that we need to change on that?
It's in order if you're willing
Okay.
to approve it.
So moved.
Second, Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Mayor Skels Harris. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet. Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. I've got one, council, do y'all have anything under other business? I know you do, Melissa. I've got one thing that we missed, or I'll just say I missed last Thursday night. We approved Adam to negotiate with Ms. Brown for her new position, but what we didn't talk about, Pam emailed me last night on the salary range. The salary range is roughly 116 to 179. And we didn't talk about where we wanted to be in that salary range. And I didn't feel comfortable making a recommendation. I have an opinion that I thought the midpoint is a good way to start. But I didn't want to make a recommendation to Adam saying, hey, try to negotiate this number without bringing that to y'all. So we need to discuss where we want that position to be. Now, I had a good conversation with Melissa yesterday because the midpoint is higher than what Melissa's made, and I was sensitive to that when I called Melissa yesterday, but Melissa gave me some really good words of wisdom about the responsibility of the position, about this position does not have the defined contribution or defined benefit plan anymore, so there's some significant differences. And the issue with someone who's been here a long time, like Melissa, I know several years ago we had the discussion about raising and bringing your salary up. That didn't happen. But bringing someone in that is below that midpoint for one of these positions, like Melissa, never get caught up, and especially in the position you're in. So I was extremely sensitive to recommending a midpoint salary that is someone who's been here and done such a good job. And I explained that to her yesterday, and
And I gave you my full support.
yes, of bringing the midpoint as the salary. So that's,
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I can tell you what I recognized from the candidates that we had, the finalists, is they were all, I think Madeline even brought it up, all or most of them were north of the top end of the range as far as what they were, put as their expectation, which probably tells me a little something about where we are in terms of market. So midpoint seems like something I would probably be comfortable with. There was something else that kind of popped into my brain while we were going through this process, and I didn't know the right time to bring it up, but this may be perfect, is just kind of looking at total, total package, the total package situation, particularly for those employees who serve at the will of the council. It definitely, when I was trying to think through what I wanted that position to look like and all that kind of stuff, it's a different employment dynamic. We've been talking about a lot of HR issues today, and in my mind, I'm kind of sitting there thinking, as it relates to pay, as it relates to benefits, I mean, we got 4 people just say gone, and gone is gone. I mean, all this stuff that we're talking about we don't have to take a survey. We don't have to have any input, exput, nothing. We just say 4 people decide, and sorry, it's over. And
we have gone to employee contracts, which typically we had not ever done before.
And that's what I made me think of it, is when Adam or somebody brought up about the contract and the things that can be in that contract as it relates to benefits and stuff like that. I mean, I know there are some external things that we can do other than pay that might make some sense, i.e. dealing with COBRA payments or some kind of things like that. That I'm just kind of, I guess what I'm trying to say is, Pam, I might, where I was on this would be to ask Pam if there are some things that we typically see out there as it relates to other benefits that other municipalities treat these positions differently. In my mind, it was some things like, maybe the insurance benefit gets extended a couple years where they don't, some kind of attractant to get more people to be in those roles. I don't know. Earlier was talking about our last city manager search, our last city attorney search. I mean, thinking about all those things and just kind of thinking, well, I think we got great people in the end. Thankfully, a couple of them were internal. I think it's worked out good and all that. But, looking forward, if there are things like that might be in play, I certainly think we ought to look at that in addition to the pay.
Okay.
I don't know.
I agree the midpoint's a good spot as well.
Okay. Midpoint. Well, what we don't want to happen, and this is what
Maybe
Pam and I were emailing back and forth, that you don't want, based on what, based on what this Ms. Brown's current salary is, I don't think you want to penalize that person because they are with the city. So if it's going to cost us X number of dollars to hire somebody from the outside, you don't want that person to feel like they're being penalized just because they put in their time with the city and we can get them cheaper than what we could get someone else. So I
totally agree.
Yeah, the midpoint's a fair number.
And it goes back to also setting the precedent of the culture of bringing experienced people in and being willing to compensate them for their experience. They shouldn't be penalized because they're already here.
So, Craig, would you mind, since Adam's not here, David, you're acting attorney now, we need to, midpoint would be where the council would want that salary to be.
I will relay that message.
Okay. Not much of a negotiation, Ms. Brown, as you're sitting here right now. All right, Melissa, you have a couple things.
I do. I just actually have an ordinance I'd like to present for first reading. Not knowing how many meetings we have left before July 1st, and we want this to go into effect as of July 1st. I'm trying to get first reading in tonight. Roman Hankins in the legal department drafted this yesterday. That tells you how fresh it is. But it's mostly housekeeping. The Alcoholic Beverage Commission at the state no longer requires that an applicant for a liquor store have a public hearing or renewals of certificates of compliance for liquor stores every 2 years like they used to. But our code still has it in there because we've been under the moratorium. Nobody's really thought about it. Moratorium ends July 1st. We're getting calls daily about people who are interested in applying for a liquor store. We don't want to have in our code that they have to advertise and have a public hearing when ABC couldn't care less. So we're asking for that to be removed. And as you know, during the pandemic, we started having more curbside delivery at the grocery stores where you pull up and they load your groceries in your car. Walmart called wanting to do that and with beer. And I talked to Roman, and he said that he felt like that's already approved with the way the state law was written. Ours wasn't really spelled out specifically to answer that question easily. So since we were making these other changes, it was a good time to put that in specifically. So it spells out that where the beer has to come from and what they have to do to make sure that they are at least 21 years old, and it's got to be delivered to their vehicle within that person's paid parking lot of their business. So that kind of spells out any requirements for that, and we thought it was a good time to put that in there. It's more frequent now. I don't think it'll go away just because more and more people are getting out now. I think this has become a convenience that people have started relying on.
And we did this also, we had to adjust our ordinances for restaurants as well to be able to.
And that's in there, but
Yeah.
this is not specifically in there.
So you have ordinance 21018.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin. Mr. Shacklet. Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Okay, you have resolution 21R23, and this is amending the.
No, we're not doing those.
Okay.
We didn't make any changes to the budget today other than what Aaron gave you. It didn't affect the water. Those were just in case we needed them.
Any other business from staff? Any other business from council?
I got one question. It just led me to think about this. It came up the other day. Do we have, this has been a little while since we talked about it, but at one time I think we talked about some limitation on the number of liquor stores that we have per person or something like that? What, is there
The
a?
state law is you cannot be an owner of more than two.
No,
as an owner.
I meant per like 10,000 people.
Yes, yes, we do.
That's a new ordinance. That was 2 or 3 years ago.
One for every 5,000, 5,000?
Yeah, it's something like that.
I forget. It is a specific number.
There's a number in there.
It's like 22 or
And
23.
every census estimate, every year, that number can change, depending on how our population changes.
So I guess it just struck me that you say we have all these people knocking on the door to get these things. Do we, I mean, are we keeping up with that? And are we still all comfortable that that number's
We're keeping up with it.
coming through? So I just want to make sure
We're keeping up with it.
All right.
Now, the question is, if we have the amount of openings available and they all come in together plus one, how we're going to choose?
Oh, I know how to choose.
Roman suggested pulling a name out of a hat. I think some do that. So
Shots.
we have talked about this. This has been a big topic for us. So we may come back later with some more requests for how to address that. Roman's been doing some research. I know he's sent us some information from a couple cities, and we may present that. It just looks like it's going to become a problem.
All right.
That's it.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll stand adjourned.